So perhaps you've heard of home biogas and the promise of converting your everyday food scraps into methane and a blue flickering hot flame to satisfy your cooking needs. Well, does it work? Does it not? What's entailed? I went through the experience so you can find out. So let's go over some of the details, some of the errors, some of the pros, some of the cons, and some of the realities of living with a home biogas unit. So we're going to look at a couple factors here. First, we're going to look at the setup that we currently have and what it entails. Then we're going to look at the level of productivity that this system produces. And then finally, we're going to contrast some pros and cons and try to answer the question, is this unit worth it for you guys? So this is the Home Biogas 2 unit, and it works great for off-grid homesteading setups. And let's go around. You can see that it's kind of overgrown with some of these beans growing up on pigeon pea that we've got right now. But let's loop around to the other side of this and take a closer look. All right, so here we are at the entrance feeder into the system. Sorry, I've got this cassava growing up above it. But what we do is we pull out this plunger, which can get a little easier some days, harder in other days. And you put your food scraps in there, and then you plunge it down. And you want to give it a little oomph and gusto so that the food kind of kicks up underneath a little bit of a lip there. And this entire bottom bag is filled with water. And so your food scraps come in, they decompose through a couple of stages, and the end product is methane that this bag contains. Now, it goes from that top bag through a charcoal filter, so it eliminates the majority of the odor. There's really no significant odor once the system's working well. We'll get to that. The only minor odor is when you pull out that plunger. Sometimes it's funky in there. But the methane ultimately goes through a filter, out that hose, around, and it connects to a stove. We'll get to that in a second. This is my super wonky outdoor off-grid toilet setup, but it is a optional add-on for the home biogas toilet. And what we have here, sorry, I haven't cleaned this off first, but what we have here is the Biotoilet. It's got some instructions on it, and we use rustic bidet, and you just, like a marine toilet, you plunge it to flush. Long story short, human manure goes up through that tube, comes into the system, and it adds a nice mix of vegetable scraps, which are very nutritious for the microbes, and manure, which balances out the pH nicely, and it keeps the system humming well. But anyway, our hose pipe comes through. It actually goes down that hill because there's a valve that you open that releases accumulated humidity and water so that it doesn't clog your pipe. Then it comes back up. We've got this yellow hose that comes here. Now let me clear this off for you guys for a moment. All right, so our general setup is this. Now, because this stove is an outdoor stove, and they do not recommend having it indoors, but well ventilated if you do, in any sense, we've got ours outdoors, and it does not come with any sort of cover. This is almost within our second year of owning the unit. This is our second stove. I had to go out of my way and buy a stove from them again because the first one corroded and rusted out. Regardless, hose comes in, you turn it on, and then another lighter helps ignite it. Now the flame is blue, so during the daytime it's very hard to see, but you can see some of the flickering there that goes on. It is adjustable to suit your flame needs. The fuller the bag, the faster and hotter the flame comes out. Just more pressure for the system, more flame. It'll start to die down the lower the bag gets. So I'm going to turn that off right now. And then when I'm done, I simply take this, cover it back up to avoid direct rain on the unit. Now, the last thing the unit needed was a name, and we decided on Chester the Digester. Now, how much gas does Chester give us? Well, it depends. Now, biogas is great for the small scale because you can guarantee that all of your feedstock, what you put into it, is food scraps. It's terrible for things like cities, which need a consistent supply of energy, and so they end up farming land elsewhere to grow things like corn or other crops just to have a continuous, unpolluted supply for the unit. But we're in the sweet spot, right? We've got our own vegetable scraps. I'll eat a papaya, I'll throw my scraps in there. I'll eat some plantains or bananas, throw my scraps in there. It all works great. Now, you can feed this system, they say, up to 3 liters of food scraps a day. So that's about a gallon, just to like be on the safe side. Now, if you do that, it's a pretty easy conversion. 1 liter of food scraps gives you about 1 hour of cooking time. I haven't done rigorous studies to fact check them on that, but I can tell you the more I feed it up to that limit, I never do over a gallon a day, over 3 liters a day, just because I don't produce that much food waste. Now, I could grow things just to feed this guy, but I'm not going to do that. So I just take what I get. And Chester puts out when I get him feeding for a while and he's all nice and fed, that bag will inflate. I've used him a couple times today. So what am I doing when I'm cooking? In the past, I've cooked things on a frying pan. Does great. He'll heat up water super quickly. So I'll like make my tea, stuff like that. Now, if I wanted to cook a pasta dinner with my wife, so we got to fill a big old pot with water, bring it up to a boil, and then add the pasta, let it boil and cook. We tend to wait till he's more full. Then we'll drain him, right? And that'll take about 75% maybe of him or 80%. So we'll wait for those like big meals and bring it out. If we were a family and we're cooking like a lot of food for a lot of people, he ain't cutting it. Not for 100%. And in fact, we don't use him for 100% of our cooking needs. We've got other systems. We can cook with electric from our solar panels. We've got solar ovens from GoSun that we can cook and heat up water with. I've got a gasifier stove that I can throw like sticks in and cook stuff with. So we've diversified our cooking methods. He's one of them. And he's one of my favorites because today is cloudy. There's not much sun, and everything else kind of runs on sunlight except for the wood. And on cloudy, rainy days, I don't want to be like stoking a little fire. So Chester works great on days like this. When's a bad day for Chester? Windy days. I've got my little setup there to keep him kind of sheltered. It doesn't work all that well, but we've got all of this vegetation kind of surrounding our stove area. Not too close. We don't want to start a fire and set our mountain on fire, but it helps be a windbreak. I wouldn't want to have this thing out in the open, unprotected from the elements, because it's really easy for the flame to blow out, especially as it gets lower down. And sometimes I've walked away from a pot of boiling water, come back, I'm like, this isn't cooking, only to find out the bag got low and the flame went out. And then I was just wasting the little bit of gas that I had left. Anyways, is it worth it? Well, the price approximately, if I'm remembering correctly, was around $700 when I got this unit, excluding the toilet. We got the unit first, then got the toilet. And we're on the island of Puerto Rico. For those of you who don't know, propane is very expensive here, and it's likely to get more expensive as time goes on. Long story short, we've calculated that it would take about like 2 to 3 years, maybe, for this unit to pay for itself, which means every 2 to 3 years, I could junk this thing, buy a brand new one, and still be saving money. So it's really worth it for me, in my opinion. The other thing, I didn't read the instruction manual that intensively when I first got it. So I thought, anything that decomposes without oxygen is going to turn into methane. That's not how chemistry works, apparently. If you fill this thing with water, and it needs a lot of water, not to run, just to start it off, you got to fill that big balloon thing. But you fill that thing with water and just start throwing vegetable scraps, hoping, fingers crossed, that it'll eventually turn into methane. It won't. It'll get very acidic. It'll smell really funky, and it won't work. You'll get gas, but it's all CO2. So you'll go to turn the thing on and it won't light. You need manure. Now, could you theoretically get the toilet extension if you don't have a neighbor with cows or animals? And then just use human manure? Probably, but you'd have to do that quite a bit because you have to use manure until it produces a flammable gas. Then you've got enough of the pH balanced for a lot of chemistry reasons that when you add food scraps, it'll start producing methane. And then you're golden from there on out. You don't need to continually add manure to keep it going. But it does help balance the pH regardless. When we finally corrected our error or realized our errors, I was going to the store and like buying them out of baking soda and dumping it in Chester's throat. And it was bubbling. It was really acidic. It was really bad. I was like with their help desk and they were responsive. Props to them, but it was rough. Finally got that pH balanced out. We found someone who had a horse, and I was like going out filling 5-gallon buckets of horse manure, mixing it with water and like chugging it down his throat. So it was an ordeal. Had I done it right the first time, I wouldn't have had to do it for a couple months later on. So how long does it take to get set up? I don't know. I didn't do it right the first time. But usually I think they say it only takes like a couple weeks is what it's supposed to do. But there's Nia. Nia's our cat. She's doing well. She's keeping rodents at bay. But I love it. The toilet works really well, especially with the bidet system. At first we had a bucket where you can circulate fresh water in. You can't hook it up to common plumbing. The pressure's too high. We did that for a while, but then we're like, we've got a bidet, and bidet beats toilet paper 10 out of 10. So you can just use the bidet to keep the toilet clean, have a scrubber out there, scrub it, make sure it's nice and clean. Problems with outdoor toilets. And yeah, it works great. I love it. Produces gas as a complete byproduct. So one more thing we gotta address is the effluent. You put food in, water comes out. So what we did is we found these water-loving plants called canna lilies. The tube, I gotta like point at the camera and get this right. There it is. The tube that goes down and out goes into a mulch bed. Hard to see, it's a little old, but we used a whole bunch of coconut husks to make a mulch bed. There's no smell. Like I'll be here and that's just me. No smell of the unit. But we put these canna lilies here to suck up a bunch of that nutrition and nutrients and water and everything. And then we cut these cannas, then we throw them on the garden, right? Well, I don't grow food crops right where this effluent comes out. You don't want to do that. Even trees, I'd be a little, wary of. But I'll use it for chop and drop, cycle it some more. Then you can use it. So that's the Homebiogas 2 unit. Chester the digester making a debut. I think if you're doing an off-grid setup where you've got the space outside and it doesn't freeze over winter, although they have come out with a product now to keep to expand where you can have these things. It's like a thermo insulated whatever it is that they have. Look into it. Yeah, I think it's very worth it for an outdoor cooking setup. If I was a better construction person and I had like outdoor, not a shed. What am I thinking of? Techo is it in Puerto Rican Spanish. But just like a roof, a canopy, like, a carport type thing that was open air, pavilion. That's the word I'm looking for. If I had an outdoor pavilion and this thing was hooked up there instead of like a charcoal grill, whew, that'd be beautiful. So check your setting. This thing's got to be on level ground. It has some specs that you got to follow on like drainage and everything, but it's pretty easy. I hate to be one of those people that say if I could do it, you could do it. Well, that's kind of the case. So yeah, home biogas, definitely worth it. A great way to produce renewable, sustainable energy from your food scraps. It works. It actually works. What a novel concept. So I've been Frenchy Powell, guys. If you've liked this video, actually physically hit the like button. Share it with your friends if they're considering a off-grid setup, or, someone you think wants to watch this video. And yeah, comment down below on what you think. Any questions you have, I'll try to get around to answering those. And best of luck, guys. Catch you in the next video.